Welcome back to Fello's Thinking Differently podcast, where we explore ways of looking at the community, the connections, and our leadership. I am your host, Alex Ficcari, and today we're talking about something that touches us all, and that is home. At Fello, we believe home is the foundation of inclusion and belonging in people's lives. And in this episode, we'll dive into what makes the communities different, the Fello communities, and the challenges facing affordable housing in Maryland, and what's going to be coming next for our communities. My guest today is Benincasa, who serves as the Senior Vice President of Community Development at Fello Communities, where he leads the organization's efforts to create inclusive, sustainable, and person-centered housing. He has been leading Fello Communities in the community development work for nearly 2 years now, and he has been working in the community development space for a decade. Welcome, Ross, to the show, and we're glad to have you here today.
Thanks, Alex. Glad to be here.
Well, I can tell you that, Ross, there's a lot of different topics that people value, and I can tell you home is definitely where the heart is, right? And so this one's particularly exciting to me. But before we dig into it, I'd love to hear from your perspective a question I ask everybody, and that is, why is it so important for us to think differently, especially about your role here?
Sure. I mean, when it comes to housing, I think that I've come from a development background, as you just said, and more often than not, developers are thinking about the bricks and mortar. They're thinking about the spreadsheets as they're kind of developing a project. And that's all well and good for certain kind of home types, certain housing. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the way that we think differently is we really lead with the tenant, right? We're really trying to think through what is the need, what is the actual problem that we're trying to solve from the housing front, and how can we at Fello utilize kind of our proficiencies, the things that we're good at, to help tenants that may be in need throughout a variety of spectrums, a variety of demographics. And so that's the way, we really think tenant first, and I think it's a completely different way when you're talking about housing, you're talking about kind of, how do we approach the supply side issue of this housing demand that we have here in Maryland and really across the country, is what are the most pressing needs for the people that need that housing, and then in what way or where can we kind of step in as an organization to address that?
Well, I think it's fantastic because when I think about housing, especially in real estate development, you're thinking about what's going to resell? How is this properly going to hold its value? Yeah. But here we're putting people first, person-centeredness.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? Yeah. It's right about person-centeredness, and I think that from our standpoint, to be honest with you, the last thing that we typically think about is the resale. We've been doing this since the late 60s, and we haven't sold a property since. And so, our standpoint is we are coming in, we are addressing a need, and we're going to provide for that need for as long as we possibly can. For as long as we're in housing, we're going to hold on to that space. That's
great. Now, you mentioned the 60s. So how did, Fellows Communities begin? Like, where did it all start from?
Yeah, sure. So Fello is about to celebrate 65 years.
Okay.
And the first service that we really provided as an organization for people with disabilities was housing. That was really the first thing. And I think it goes to show, today we hear a lot on the news, around grabbing your morning coffee about kind of the housing needs that we have here in Maryland. And I think it just goes to show what the importance of shelter has kind of been for generations now, right? This was really the first thing we got into. We still have our first house today, by the way. We just had a renovation a couple years ago on it. But, it is something that for us has been kind of paramount. We really don't believe that you can have safety. We don't believe that you can have kind of the ability to kind of work on the other needs in your life if you don't know where it is you're going home to, right? Yeah. If you don't know that you have not only shelter, but shelter that's safe, shelter that's well cared for, a shelter that is a space that, it's not just housing, it's what you called it in the opening, it's home, right? Yeah. And I think that is something that we really pride ourselves on. How do we kind of continue to make sure that we're providing a home for these people and it doesn't feel like just kind of a temporary stopover in their housing journey? Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. And, something else I want to take note of and I'd like you to comment on. I've heard also that, obviously you're prioritizing housing, which I think is fantastic. But I've heard a lot of you're prioritizing housing for everyone, for all. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that? And do you really mean all? Everyone.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah. Alex, we're taking applications if you want to certainly
Okay.
come into one of our spaces. So, we obviously started in housing for people with disabilities. We started for people that Fellow served. And it was, that was really our housing focus for decades, was just focusing on the kind of specific, unique needs of people with disabilities and what they may need in their housing. Over that time, you find that you get quite good at tenant services in general when you're working with people that have specific needs. And so we also recognize as we're going into our communities, we're talking to people that work for us, people that work in just the general workforce, that the housing crunch was getting worse and worse and worse ever since '08, really. Sure. It just kind of became exacerbated in 2020. And so we recognize that if we are all about inclusivity at Fellow, which I think, not to really sum up our whole mission and our whole vision and kind of what we do into one word, but inclusivity is the one that I think I speak about the most and that we talk about the most as an organization. If we're serious about that, then we also have to recognize that that means that we have to think about what is the best type of inclusive housing environment that we can create. We're extremely proud of the group homes that we have. We think that they're the best in the state. That said, there are also opportunities to create ADA or universally designed housing within multifamily developments, right? There's opportunities to create a diverse income range within those multifamily developments, within those mixed-use developments, to make sure that everyone from what we call market rate housing, which is just people that can afford kind of the price on the street, to people that are maybe at 60% of the median income.
Sure.
Families that are at 30% of the median income, the people that are struggling the most in our communities, how can we make sure that they have housing as well? And so that mixed income model versus all affordable or all market rate or all disability oriented has really become kind of an important ethos for us to kind of focus on as we continue to grow, because we really do think that's not only the most sustainable housing type moving forward, but really the best in terms of livability for the people that we serve, but also just our tenants as they continue to grow.
Well, what I hear the underlying message in what you're saying is really the name of the program, which is Fellow Communities, right? And I think another interesting that I heard you say when you're thinking about Fellow Communities, I'm kind of curious from your vantage point is when you're developing the community itself, like what would happen to the neighborhood? Like what can somebody expect when you're developing a community?
Yeah, so when we think about communities, one thing that's unique to Fellow Communities is we really focus on infill housing. So infill housing is generally you're creating something in an area that already has infrastructure of some kind.
Okay.
We think about infrastructure as water, sewer, electric, and the like, but really the other side of infrastructure is there a neighborhood there? Is there a social fabric already that's kind of integrated in there?
Yeah.
And can we create housing that complements the reason why people decided to move there years before we were even interested?
Sure,
right?
sure.
And I think that's extremely important. And so when we talk about communities, we are not really looking to come in and create, a master planned community. This isn't the next Columbia. We're not going to kind of come in and create an all new opportunity. What we are trying to do, though, is create a better product that's out there, a better home that's out there in a community and in a space that people want to be in, that they usually just probably can't afford to be there, right? And so we're heavily focused in Easton. Easton and Talbot County has the highest rent growth of any county in Maryland since 2019 and really low supply.
Okay.
So when we look at, this is a highly desirable place to be, there's a lot of demand to be here, and because of that, the people that work here, the nurses, the first responders, the teachers, the hospitality workers, they're getting priced out of their opportunity to be there and having to commute in. Can we address that? Can we find a space and it's kind of within that area? So when we talk about building communities, we do commercial, we do some things like that, but it's really more about kind of meshing into what's already there and how can we enhance it.
That's interesting. And now, when you look at, let's talk about Easton for a moment. Okay, so when you're talking about that community, what are those essential components? Because you're not building the whole, town, right? You're just building there's got to be certain elements that need to be included in there that make the community worth living. You want to be there, you desire to be there. Can you maybe talk about how that plays into your planning and what you develop?
When we talk about communities and community development, there's a general kind of consensus around what community development is. It's a vague term,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it really comes down to it's a shared problem that a number of people are addressing to build inclusivity and build sustainability. Those are generally like the three things that surround community development in any practice.
Yeah.
And from our standpoint, we have to have town support. So that's kind of one stakeholder in that community development to kind of make sure it moves forward and continues on. We have to have buy-in from the neighbors too. So I said before that we don't sell our properties. Sure. So, the phrase I use constantly, Alex, is that we're not coming to you as a developer, we're coming as a neighbor. So we actually need to figure this out together, right? Yeah. We've got to, and so we hold community meetings before every single project, before the town even sees it, so that we can hear from the neighbors. We can hear what they want in the community. We can hear what they don't want. We can hear, what is it that they're concerned about? There's always concerns, right? So tell us, right? What are those concerns? If you had the pen and paper, how would you design the thing?
Yeah.
And we take that into consideration when we're going through this process. And then when we're actually building affordable housing specifically, when you talk about community development and you talk about kind of what are those really important pieces, you have to think about what your connection to services is, because so often the people that are in that low-income housing need access to services, and they don't always have the best transportation, right? They don't always have that. And so why do we love infill housing? We do it around transportation. We do it around walkability. We do it in areas that have easy walkable services, like Port Street Commons is quite literally maybe a half block, 2 blocks away from most of the services that those tenants would be receiving.
Fantastic.
And so that's really, as we kind of think about community development, we think about what that is. It's not just the bricks and mortar and the spreadsheets like I mentioned before. It's for us, when we say we're tenant centric, that also includes what is it that the community needs out of this space, and how can we make sure that they're an advocate for us by the time it actually gets to be a decision point for the town or for the county or for the city.
Yeah, so you're really reaching out, getting stakeholder engagement, participation. So Ross, as I'm thinking back on this a little bit, when you thank you for enlightening me about the different components of it, that make a community what it is. But I'm wondering, could you maybe give me a little bit of a more tangible example to see the good and how it's manifesting through all the effort see those elements? Yeah,
sure. I mean, so I'll give you an example from just a few weeks ago. I mean, our tenant services team, which really is, I think, and I tell our team this all the time, they all do great work. Right. But the big differentiator between us and the developers is the tenant services team. And as we build that up, how they do what they do, and that really sets them apart. And just a few weeks ago, for our residents at Port Street Commons, which is 9 units of affordable housing out in Easton, we had a back-to-school night where we had everything from backpacks to school supplies to Fello branded kind of pens and the like, and it was a huge Staples grab bag. We had ice cream there. We had kind of a really trying to celebrate what it meant to get back into the rhythm of school for a lot of these children that otherwise, didn't always have the resources to get those supplies, right? And that was one thing that we had heard from one resident, kind of spurred that with our assistant director of tenant services. And they had said, like, hey, do you know of a resource that is providing supplies for my child? And that was an immediate chance for us to raise our hand and say, well, we can do this. I mean, this is absolutely in our wheelhouse, right? And so that's, I think, an example of kind of, what is it? How does it differentiate us? What does it mean to kind of be a developer that's tenant first and person centered? It's what does a tenant need? Can we raise our hand and provide that? And that was an example that we were super proud of from a couple of weeks ago, where all these adorable kids just kind of left with backpacks too big for them, loaded up with school supplies and an ice cream cone in their hand, and it was a wonderful feeling.
Well, what I also like about that story is that it just reinforces everything you've been saying. Is you're not just developing land and communities, you're listening and you're being there. So that's great.
Great, thank you.
All of that, I mean, it kind of does foster, it starts to create a question for me that, you're going to run into some adversity, right? You're going to run into some misconceptions, people who aren't familiar and need to be educated. I'm kind of curious when you use the term affordable housing, right? There's probably our own preconceived thoughts or experiences. How do you how do you address those misconceptions? And then maybe you can even slightly touch on how is a Fello property, what does it look like?
Affordable housing is a unique one because what used to be less veiled stigma, 10 years ago or so, you used to hear people very directly say, we don't want this housing, we don't want these people, we don't want this tenancy in this neighborhood, in our town.
Correct.
Now that's become much more veiled. And so you hear often something along the lines of, I'm not against the project. I think we need this. This is an important housing type, but. And it often comes down to the popular NIMBY term, not in my backyard. It's, we need this, just not here, right? We need this, just kind of not here. And so from the way that we do things, let me back up for a second. We are not going to fix that opinion, right? I just need to be very clear on that right from the get-go. Yeah. People that have chosen to share that opinion publicly, veiled and cloaked or not, are not going to have their opinion swayed by the developer trying to do that very thing.
Right.
That being said, I think that a couple ways that we specifically kind of, I would say, maybe placate their concerns or just kind of diminish any of the stigmas that are attached to it are just, number one, around the fact that we do mixed income housing. And so the big difference there is that we're setting aside at least 30% of our units for some level of affordability. We're also setting aside units for the local homeless shelter, for example, and for community partners to have transitional housing. But we're also setting aside at least 60% usually of our units for just market rate housing.
Okay.
That's been one way. I think the other is that we're unique in how we build our housing. So when we build our housing, it is high-end finishes. I mean, we have people in our company that love to say that when they see during our ribbon cuttings kind of the condition of our apartments, and then they go look at luxury units in Baltimore or Annapolis or kind of pick your space, and they're a little jealous, I think, of kind of what we're kind of putting out there. So, we're talking about high-end LVT, quartz countertops, 9-foot ceilings, beautiful molding throughout it, premium appliances in every single unit, large 2 and 3 bedrooms for our family-oriented units. We are really kind of focused on making this feel like home, and so that there's never a situation where the tenant has to do anything except make it feel like theirs.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's unique about the way that we handle housing is that we don't do affordable units and market rate units. We just set a ratio for the development. And so, as an example, Alex, if you're in a market rate unit and I'm in an affordable unit, and we become friends and we're going over to each other's apartments to watch the game on Sunday, there is not a situation where, unless we shared it, one person would know what the other person pays. They look exactly the same in terms of the finishes and the luxuriness. And between one tenant and the next, over a turnover, one unit may go from affordable to market rate, just kind of based on the ratio of that development. So it's one thing we're proud of, and
absolutely,
I think it helps us stand out quite a bit.
So, Ross, can you let's dig in a little bit more when you talk about the misconceptions, right? Because people are going to have their notions. And as you said, you can't change that, right? But can you maybe share a story of where you have seen people's expectations completely change in just one meeting or one presentation?
Sure. I mean, so when we were developing Eastern Crossing, or as we're starting our process with Eastern Crossing, we held 3 community meetings.
Okay.
And the first one was really just to gather community input. And I could tell they were extremely disappointed because they came in, they wanted to see renderings, they wanted to see pictures, and it really was just fact-finding. It was just trying to make sure that we were going in the right direction, we're developing kind of the right type of product for what they were looking for. And we got a lot of information from that.
Okay.
The second meeting, we took that information, created the renderings based on what we thought we heard, and had certain uses and the like in it. And the first reaction that we got from the people there was honestly quite underwhelming. Like they were looking at this and they said, "This isn't what I meant. This isn't the. This doesn't feel like Easton. This doesn't. It has this issue, whatever it might be." And I think just kind of going to show for us the importance of these meetings. I mean, this is a two-way street.
Yeah.
This is not a community meeting where we're just trying to project onto you what we're going to do here and adios, right? And so we took that feedback back, retweaked the buildings substantially, brought it back, and it was the first time that we really had that moment where we projected the renderings, we had this video made, we kind of showed what we were imagining, and you could see these neighbors that have been in that community, raised their kids there. I mean, generations, they've been in this neighborhood, and they were there. Like this was their, they could feel themselves walking down the rail trail, going to the ice cream shop. They could feel themselves, meeting new people that might be living in this space, and they felt like they were in Easton. And I think that, that was extremely rewarding to kind of see their faces, all of a sudden, they got it, right?
Yeah,
and they kind of, they grasped onto it and understood. And that's so much of, to the point of, like, how do we get around kind of the stigmas of affordable housing? How do we kind of, get around those concerns? Some of it is just showing that we care enough about what the neighbors actually do want and care about, that we're willing to come back to them 3 times with different visions to make sure that they know that we're actually listening. So that was extremely kind of rewarding to see them do that. And then by the time we went to the town for approval, there was maybe 2 comments left, a bunch of supporters. It was a wonderful feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's truly the sense of community you've been talking about right there. So
yeah, exactly.
It's nice to see it manifest into something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they really felt like we were a neighbor and not a developer by that 3rd meeting, and that's our whole intention.
No, I think it's very inspirational, and I love the approach. And I'm kind of curious is what the work that Fello Communities is doing. Do you think that's kind of influencing maybe potentially development in the region, maybe outside of our circles? Or?
I really hope so. We can't fix the problem ourselves, right? So we are, advocates for just about every housing bill that comes up at the state. We're advocates for every local housing bill that comes up. We are advocates for almost all residential development projects that have some affordability aspect to them. We are, the housing crisis, 90,000 plus units that we're short on just here in Maryland.
90,000?
Over 90,000.
Wow. Okay.
Not going to be solved by Fello. I think that that's something that we fully recognize. And we are in huge support of other developers that have like-minded, for-profit, nonprofit, whatever it might be, if they are moving toward creating housing for working families, moving toward creating housing for the people that are kind of most in need, working 2-3 jobs. Not only do we support those developments, oftentimes we offer our services and our help with them. If there's, we have many developers calling us trying to figure out how we're doing this, or is there a way that we can help them kind of understand housing, ADA housing.
Yeah,
and we help them understand kind of how we handle mixed income, how we do the affordable tenant selection process. And so we make ourselves as available as possible because we really do hope that it does spur more small, scattered site to larger development that helps address this need.
So it's good to hear. So one, there are other people doing this, outside of Fello, but it sounds like Fello, it really is not only leading the way with some nuances and things that make Fello Communities special, but you're also helping others. And so that's really exciting. And I want to kind of transition into something else. You mentioned, and for the people who don't understand, we were talking about developing these Fello Communities. You mentioned market rate housing and mixing the income. I heard you mention that. Could you maybe tell me a little bit of why is that important and how is that different?
Sure. So I think that from a data standpoint, there is plenty of data to show that diversity of income through daily life, diversity of income through livability, diversity of income through workforce and education is a net positive for everyone involved.
Okay.
Right. And so there's data to show, for example, that diversity of household income in early childhood education is far superior in terms of progress and results to more homogeneous centers. There's plenty of data to show that housing opportunities for people that may be low income in mixed income environments helps them not only feel safer and feel more secure, but even physically leads to everything from less depression to less smoking. I mean,
wow.
there is a
Okay.
lot of data to back up that these are better environments than just straight affordable low-income housing. That is not to say that that housing doesn't serve a purpose as well. There are situations, there's areas of our state that have such a dire need that the more units they can get on the ground, the better right now. I was just having this conversation with our assistant director at Tenant Services. We are building developments consistently, and as families grow in our apartments, they add a dog, they add a child, whatever it might be. They're knocking on our doors 2 years before we're getting ready to launch this development to try and get on a wait list because they want to stay with us. They love that model and what we're able to provide, and they know they're going to outgrow their space. And it's a wonderful feeling.
Can you maybe share a story with us to talk a little bit about where you've seen all this effort come to fruition and change lives?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think that we have several. I mean, one thing I'm extremely proud of is our partnership with Talbot Interfaith Shelter. They are the only homeless shelter in Talbot County and where Easton's located. And we have an agreement with them where every single development that we build, we set aside at least one unit for families transitioning out of homelessness. And it's one thing that we kind of miss here in Maryland and across the country is there's a gap between families that have graduated, let's say, a homeless shelters program, and their ability to actually pay the median rent on the market, right? So they may have jobs, they may have bank accounts, they may have, all the things that they originally brought them to the shelter have been sorted out, except that they can't afford the $22.50 median rent that is there in the community. And so we have a family right now in one of our developments that is mom and her teenage and adult daughters that are a part of that program, and to see them decorate a home for the first time, to see kind of the joy that they get. We don't have keys, we have fobs, right? And so when we hand over the fob to those tenants, and the amount of tears that our tenant services team has seen. These folks that don't even know where to rent a U-Haul, where to do. I mean, these are, and our tenant services team does such a fantastic job of developing resources for them and really kind of helping them, not only get off on the right foot, but continue to work with our team through financial literacy programs and the like, so that they can continue to move up and take on that lease eventually, build their credit, and continue in that positive direction. So that's a family that has kind of stuck with me, and they're still a tenant of ours today. That's just been kind of a wonderful addition to one of our communities, and I think that that type of partnership, and as we grow and as we move into other areas, obviously Anne Arundel being our home county and others, we are always looking for additional partnerships from groups that have a housing need that may not have the capacity, may not have the bandwidth, may not have whatever it might be to actually build that thing or manage that piece. And those are really where, at the end of the day, why you do this type of work is, to see the reaction from, from the little kids that are, on the playground at Port Street Commons or the families that are kind of getting their keys for the first time. So.
Well, that's beautiful. It sounds like the mission continues.
Yes, absolutely.
What's next right now for Fello Communities? What does the future look like?
We're busy. We are.
Thanks for taking the time to be here.
No, it's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are currently, we just did a ribbon cutting last week on our new office building out in Easton. So this will be our leasing office for all the Eastern Shore. We are currently working on a 7-unit mansion-style infill housing development called the Laura House. That'll have 2 affordable units, 1 unit for families transitioning out of homelessness, and then 4 market rate units. We've got Silo Court, which we're also working on right now, 28 townhomes built toward workforce housing.
Okay.
And that stemmed from the local utility company and the local police department seeing us build these small things around town, came to us and said, when we're trying to recruit for kind of our low to mid-level jobs and they've got a family, we have nowhere to put them, right? They can go kind of rent a house out in the country, or they can take a big risk and rent the $600,000 home. That's kind of our median price right now in Talbot County. And so they just weren't able to get their employees, right? And they came to us and said, we need a workforce housing. We need something for people right around that 85% of that median income, the teachers, the nurses, et cetera. And so that's what Silo Court will be, all 3 and 4 bedrooms, really geared toward households that have, whether it be children, multiple employees, whatever it might be. That's what that's really geared toward. And then our biggest project is Easton Crossing.
Okay.
Easton Crossing, 117 units, 28,000 square feet of retail, 5 buildings on an old Purdue chicken grain campus, as eastern shore as you can get. Right along a rail line, current rail trail. And we're very excited about that. So we're currently in the process. We're doing site work. All the demolition's been done. We're talking to tenants for the retail space. And so if there's anyone that happens to be listening that scoops a great, ice cream or whatever it might be that wants to be in downtown Easton, give us a call. And that we'll open that first building in 2027. Project will be done in 2029. So, that's our biggest one right now. And finally, we are looking at emerging markets. Since transitioning to Fello, we have really started to look beyond kind of our traditional geographic boundaries. And we're looking for spaces that may need housing, that may need a nonprofit partner to come in on a unique piece of land in a downtown, in an infill space that's providing kind of that affordable market rate housing that these communities need. So we're just starting to have some of those conversations with different stakeholders in different counties and cities around Maryland.
For somebody who is interested in this, right? Where do they go about learning about these homes and applying? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so fellowcommunities.org has information on all our current housing as well as our projects that are underway. Leasing information's on there as well. For market rate housing, it's just as simple as just about any other housing you can imagine. It's an online application that we go through and our tenant services team processes. If you think that you may qualify for our affordable housing and different developments, we do run a lottery system for that. And again, when that lottery opens up, be right on the homepage at fellowcommunities.org. You can also sign up on that website for more information so that we can reach out to you via email and the like when we have different lotteries open up for those that may be interested.
Ross, I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the show. And you're doing incredible work in the community, and I can't thank you enough on behalf of me and your fellow viewers, as well as the fellow members. And just want to say, if any of you have enjoyed everything you've heard today and you want to learn more, make sure you go to fellowcommunities.org and be sure to apply, ask questions, and contact them. But until next time, I'm Alex Ficari, your host, and we'll see you next time.